Noah's Ark. Before the great flood, the world had become filled with wicked men, so much so that the Lord decided to destroy the face of the earth. And God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth." The Lord chose Noah, a man of God, to build an ark in which the righteous would be saved along with some of the animals. Noah preached of conversion and repentance for 120 years, but only 8 people gave their hearts to the Lord and entered the ark. The rain came, and the people sought the safety of higher ground or the ark itself. But the angel of the Lord had closed the door of the ark, and it could not be opened. Probation had closed. It was too late. Death and destruction covered the earth. The thoughts of man were evil continually. God extended an invitation, but it was not accepted. This was a judgment of man. All the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground. God had saved his people through the flood, but they would spend almost 1 year in the ark, waiting for the floodwaters to recede and new life to begin. Noah and his family were anxious to leave the ark. Finally, Noah knew it was safe to leave. He offered a sacrifice to the Lord, and the Lord placed a bow of promise in the sky that he would never again destroy the earth with a flood. The Bible tells us where the ark of Noah came to rest. The ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. But what is Ararat? The name Ararat, as it appears in the Bible, is the Hebrew equivalent of Urartu, ancient country of Southwest Asia mentioned in Assyrian sources from the early 13th century BC. This area included parts of eastern Turkey, Armenia, and Iran. Moses was not speaking of a specific mountain when writing Genesis. He was speaking of a country, Urartu. So the Bible was saying the ark came to rest in the mountains of the country of Urartu. In eastern Turkey, across the valley from Mount Ararat, is the site we will be visiting. This area was first photographed in an aerial survey conducted in 1959 by Francis Gary Powers. Later, Turkish Lieutenant Duripanar spotted the boat-shaped object in these photographs, so in 1960, a group from the United States journeyed to the site, but they prematurely concluded it was just a natural formation. That same year, Life magazine featured photos of the site. Is there a historical record from ancient civilizations of Noah's Ark existing? Berosus the Chaldean wrote, "It is said there is still some part of the ship in Armenia, at the mountain of the Chaldeans, and some people carry off pieces of the bitumen, which they take away, and use chiefly as amulets for the averting of mischiefs." Today, we can look at a map of Turkey and see this site listed as Nuhun Gemisi, or Noah's Big Boat. Making the trip to the site, we landed next to the very large Lake Von, which once hosted the ancient capital of Urartu named Tushpa, located along its shore. Heading out through the countryside, we see an extinct volcano. Crossing a mountain, we soon see our first glimpse of the famous Mount Ararat in the distance. In the shadows of Ararat is the city of Dobayazit that we pass through, heading toward the Noah's Ark site. Mount Ararat is a beautiful mountain, complete with a rich history of mountain climbers searching for the Ark, but without success. Across the valley, we stop and see the government-erected road sign, Nuhun Gemisi, 5 kilometers up the mountain. On Ron Wyatt's first trip to the region in 1977, he didn't know where to begin searching, and he only had 3 days in the area. So he and his teenage sons prayed that their taxi would stall in areas where they needed to search. That day, God stalled their taxi in 3 different locations, and here is our first taxi stop. High on the mountain is the resting place of Noah's ship. The name of this mountain is translated as Doomsday Mountain, named so for the deadly event of the flood. As we drive up the mountain, we can see Lesser Ararat and Greater Ararat across the valley. Both are post-flood volcanic mountains that were not even here during the flood, and they would be the last place one should search for the Ark. We finally made it to the Ark. Looking at it from the stern or rear, one can see the boat-shaped outline of the Ark. It has a rounded stern and a pointed bow or front. The symmetrical shape indicates that it is a man-made structure. Ron Wyatt made 24 trips out here to conduct tests and do research at this boat-shaped formation. Photos taken at different times of the year have brought out different features of the boat. There was so much convincing evidence uncovered at the site that the Turkish government declared this area to be Noah's Ark National Park, and yet today, the world is unaware of this amazing discovery. Using Google Earth, we can zoom in on the site with satellite imagery to see the Ark, and also the visitor center that was constructed by the Turkish government. It was on June 21, 1987, that a ceremony was held on the mountain to commemorate the site as Noah's Ark National Park. Dignitaries from around the country assembled to break bread and celebrate this wonderful find. The governor, military officers, and other key officials were participating in a celebration of discovery. Ron Wyatt was a special guest because of the extensive work that he had accomplished at the site. The visitor center would welcome guests from around the world to gaze upon the Ark. As concrete was placed in the foundation by the governor and by Ron Wyatt, excitement was in the air. This was a monument to the mortal remains of Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark was found. The next day, an article appeared in Turkey's largest newspaper announcing Noah's Big Boat, open for tourism. Now, we make our way inside the visitor center to view the informative evidence on display. Various diagrams and photos are assembled to point out the important features of the Ark. Specimens from the Ark are also on display, including petrified wood and sea fossils from the area, which indicate this mountain is water-laid rock. A guest book shows us that people are visiting the site from all over the world. Many different countries are represented here. Hasan Ozer has worked in the visitor center since it opened. He has lived his entire life in a village here on the mountain, just above the Ark, and has a great deal of history associated with the Ark. His photo appeared in a Knoxville, Tennessee newspaper, so our team brought him a laminated copy for his own. Hasan now tells us some interesting history about the Ark formation.
Tabii zaten biz gördük, biz de Rolvayt'a söyledik. Bunun gemisi var ya, 1948 senesinde gece bir kayma deprem oldu. Sabahleyin baktık ki her taraf gitmiş. Bunun gemisi bir ada güçlüğüne kalmıştır. Her akşam üzerine bir elektrik lambası gibi bir ışık yanardı.
In 48, there was an earthquake, and it was in the night time, and we just wake up in the morning and we see the earth was moved, and we saw the shape like an ark.
De ki 1960 yıllarında Türk Hava Kuvvetleri'ne bağlı bir pilot tarafından bunun fotoğrafı çekiyor. Gidiyor Ankara'ya.
69'da, ha?
1960 yıllarında.
60 yıllarında.
60 yıllar söyle.
Also, after that time, there was a light we could see in the night time in the up on the village when we look down to the ark side, and people was believing that it's holy things, and when they come on to the next to the ark, this light is going off. You know, you cannot find.
Nuh gemisi
Kendi şahsi olarak.
benim kendi şahsi olarak ben de hem inanıyorum hem de karar veriyorum. Çünkü neden? Her taraf gitti. Nuh'un gemisi o böyle ada gibi içinde kaldı. Her akşam üzerinde bir ışık yanırdı. Sarı, yeşil, kırmızı. Kimisi böyle bir ziyaret, kimisi bir türbe, kimisi bir hazinedir. Ama araştırma yapıldıktan sonra izin arada kayboldu gitti. Ben de inanıyorum. Seda bir daha var. Söyle, onu söyle.
He say that if in my personal thinking is well, I see after this earthquake there is a shape like an arc, and also there was a light which is colored light, green, yellow, and reddish lights we saw there, and lots of people were in the village. They were saying that's the holy place. Somebody says there is some gold, we should go dig it up and stuff like this. He says especially when you come next to it, it's going off. The light you cannot see anymore. But he said after the government confirmed that that's the Noah's Ark, there is no light anymore. And you know, that's make me think it is Noah's Ark.
Do you believe Noah's Ark actually existed? Could the legend that sounds like a fairy tale really become proven fact? Well, the search has been going on since biblical times. And in a moment, you're going to meet some people who are positive they have found the Ark. Now, we know such claims have been made before. But a few months ago, these people came to 2020 with some new and intriguing scientific findings. We followed them to the mountains of eastern Turkey. And what you'll see is a bizarre adventure with a host of unlikely characters. Tom Gerald's story takes many twists and turns.
That's the seductive beauty that brings them here, snow-capped Mount Ararat. The explorers looked for the Ark there since that's the highest point around here. And as the floodwaters receded, presumably that's where it would have landed. But the Bible describes the mountains of Ararat, mountains plural. Is it possible that the Ark came to rest on one of the smaller sister mountains to Ararat? The boat-shaped site was first found and photographed by a Turkish army captain back in 1959. It was quickly explored and dismissed as a freak of nature. But Wyatt, an amateur archaeologist, rekindled interest in it a few years ago. He brought in Dave Fassel, a marine salvage expert, to assess it. The Doomsday Mountain team brought in some high technology to explore the oldest legend of man. They began scanning their site with a molecular frequency generator. It's a device used by surgeons to pinpoint cancer tumors, and it's been used by Fassel to locate underwater treasure. This time, the molecular frequency generator began to pick up a unique pattern of iron lines beneath the earth.
Okay, bring that one up.
They began placing ribbons along those lines. The finished shape, outlined by the ribbons, was that of a huge ship, the approximate length and width of Noah's Ark, as described in the Bible. The fascinating field of ribbons soon attracted higher academic interest.
That looks like iron. Okay.
Dr. John Baumgartner, a physicist with Los Alamos Laboratories, sent samples back to the lab for analysis and confirmed that the metal they were tracing with the ribbons was indeed iron. With the width and the length known, the only remaining question was depth. By locating the depth of the hull, they could determine if the boat-shaped object had the cargo capacity described in the biblical ark. To resolve this final issue, Wyatt and Fassel brought geologist Tom Finner to Turkey with his company's heavy-duty subsurface radar equipment. Gear like this located the black box cockpit recorder on the floor of the frozen Potomac River after the Air Florida crash.
Suppose this rock were a foot or 2 feet underground. Would it give you a reading as to where that was? Could you locate it?
Yes, we could.
Is it possible that there will be a moment at which you'll say, this is a man-made object?
The symmetry of the feature suggests it's about, I hope to prove that the underground structure is in fact that of a boat.
It was here, several miles short of the boat-shaped site, that a waiting game began for Finner and the others. The party needed a final go-ahead from the Turkish government to complete their probe of Doomsday Mountain.
Anyway, we're going to hang in like smell on a skunk till there's nothing left to get this done.
Hanging like the smell on a skunk. The Turkish government stopped the exploration. What now?
Since we were there, Barbara, things have cooled down, and they've sent their own team of scientists in to take a look at this site. It's a very fascinating location.
Ground-penetrating radar was used on the formation to see what is inside. The reflections created a picture of timbers underground. This diagram shows us some of the main structural elements of the Ark, including parallel and repeated patterns, indicating a man-made site.
Indeed, there is something beneath that rock besides rock. A radar device developed by Geophysical Survey Systems in Hudson was used on the mountain. The device, called SIR, is used by energy exploration companies to analyze what's below the Earth's surface. According to SIR, something man-made is under Mount Eridog.
This data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. These reflections are occurring very periodic, too periodic to be random natural type interface.
Compared to an aircraft carrier 1,000 feet long, we can see the Ark is quite large. The Ark was a high-tech vessel that was designed to survive a catastrophic flood that would destroy the surface of the Earth. Complete with a keel, keelsawns, and anchor stones, it was truly a work of art designed to save the human race from annihilation. The Bible tells us the Ark was 300 cubits in length. The Ark formation has been measured to be 515 feet long, which is exactly 300 Egyptian cubits. Moses, when writing the Genesis account, would have been accustomed to using the longer Egyptian cubit of 20.6 inches. The Bible mentions an earlier cubit, cubits according to the former measure. This references the Egyptian cubit, which was divided into 28 digits, making up the cubit rod. Many centuries later, the 18-inch Hebrew cubit was developed and implemented. At the Tel Megiddo in Israel, Solomon's gates can be measured to exactly 6 Egyptian cubits, showing further evidence of its early usage. One can easily see the rib timbers near the stern on the starboard side of the Ark. This was part of the superstructure of the Ark, much like ships are constructed today. Horizontal boards would have been attached to these vertical ribs. Here we can see vertical fissures between the ribs. These ribs run perpendicular to the mud flow around the structure, indicating once again man-made construction. Local village boys greet us as we take a look at the starboard side of the Ark, which curves uphill toward the front of the Ark. This side is predominantly buried in the soil. The outside of the bow, or front, is just before us, and then we scan down the starboard side to see the top of the rib timbers. In the distance, we can see Mount Ararat and Lesser Ararat. We now pan over to the port side of the Ark near the stern. This side is less preserved, but we can see one large rib timber standing at attention. It has been beautifully preserved and has retained the curvature of the hull. From here we look toward the front of the Ark, and we can see a large hole which was blown open in 1960, when the first group came here from the United States to inspect the site. We are now standing on the middle deck of the Ark, and now pan over to the interior of the port side, where we can see 4 horizontal protrusions in a row. They are arranged in a regular pattern, indicating man-made construction. These would have been horizontal deck support timbers, extending toward the middle of the deck. At the stern, we can see the symmetrical shape of the boat, including the center mound, where the decks have collapsed one on top of another. Continuing to inspect the stern, we can see 5 objects in a row along the inside port area of the deck. These have been measured at regular intervals and appear to be vertical posts that would have supported the deck. The ark originally came to rest higher on the mountain, but was pulled down to its current location amidst a lava or mud flow, which impaled it on this rock outcropping. Ron Wyatt was operating his ground-penetrating equipment before Turkish authorities when he spotted an object just below the surface. What they found was this beautiful deck timber. It was tested at Galbraith Labs for organic carbon. The level of organic carbon was extremely high, thus proving this object was once living matter, consistent with wood. Mr. Wyatt was able to display the deck timber on CNN when he was interviewed on their network. The timber is in 3 layers, much like plywood, with glue oozing out at the end. This makes it stronger than one solid piece of wood. The outer area is covered in black pitch. Some nails can also be seen on its surface. This layering of wood may have been the gopher wood mentioned in Genesis. Just above the ark site is the Uzungili village. Its former name in the 19th century was Nasr. This pronunciation is similar to Nicer, a village that the Babylonian Berosus described as being near the ark site. Josephus in the 1st century said, "Its remains are shown there by the inhabitants to this day." This would tell us the ark would be in an accessible location. These local villagers would have had a tourist trade, accommodating visitors to the ark. The visitors to the ark would have stayed overnight here and would have bought souvenirs in the village. Evidence of this was discovered in 2000, when an archaeologist found this potsherd 20 yards from the ark. On the concave side, it has a carving of a man using a hammer to drive a nail, much like Noah building the ark. On the convex side, an ancient ink drawing shows a man releasing birds, matching the biblical narrative of Noah releasing a raven and a dove. This is just another piece of amazing evidence found here at the ark site. Using radar equipment, Ron Wyatt discovered an open cavity on the starboard side of the ark. Utilizing a core drilling technique, he was able to gain access to the interior of the ark. Stunning evidence was pulled from the belly of the ship. Using an improvised long rake device, petrified animal dung was extracted from the hull. Next, cat hair was also pulled from the cavity. Then, a petrified antler was extracted. These are all items that one would expect to find in the bottom of the ark. The Bible tells us the antediluvians were skilled in metalworking. Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every craftsman in bronze and iron. This large metal rivet, or metal washer around a metal rod, was found by Ron Wyatt when he had taken a tour group to the site in 1991. The center rod had been struck while it was hot, causing it to flare out, holding the washer in place. Test results showed that it contained 8% aluminum metal. Aluminum metal is man-made, thus proving the site to be man-made. Skeptics have said Mr. Wyatt was lying about the testing. But was he really? When the Ark Discovery International team was at the Ark site, they used a metal detector to locate metal fittings on the Ark. This is a crescent-shaped piece of metal that had been a circular washer in its better days and was found near the bow on the port side. A portion of it tested at Galbraith Labs in Tennessee, and the results were stunning. It was 8% aluminum metal, just as Ron Wyatt's test had revealed. The test additionally showed a small amount of titanium metal that is also man-made. The Ark Discovery team continued its analysis at the site and located another fitting on the starboard side. A portion of it was sent to Galbraith Labs for testing, and again, there were incredible results. It contained 8% aluminum metal, 1.3% titanium metal, plus 3.8% magnesium metal, all indicative of the Ark formation being a man-made structure. The Encyclopedia Britannica tells us, because of its chemical activity, aluminum never occurs in the metallic form in nature. These unique metal components are special markers that were left behind, which prove the site is without a doubt a man-made structure utilizing high-tech construction techniques consistent with what we should find in Noah's Ark. Modern man didn't discover how to make aluminum metal until around 1900, but the antediluvians had this knowledge in their day. Other metal fittings were found on the port side of the deck. Our metal detector picked up metal readings where a rectangular plate was positioned on a flat plane. This plate originally had 6 rivets. One is still visible on the left side. Other metal fittings can be seen around the Ark in various locations. The metal fittings have different colors from the surrounding material, making it easier to locate them at the site. On the outer portion of the Ark, at a higher level, we were able to see this object that appears to be a metal cap on top of a vertical post. It has an X impression embossed in the center of it. The left side of the cap is missing, but the top and this immediate side are still affixed to the post. The X impression is indicative of a man-made structure with the 90-degree angles. Our second taxi stop is the village of Kazan, where large anchor stones can be found that once hung from the rear of the Ark. Just down the valley from Noah's Ark, we come to the village of Kazan, where portions of the Ark's directional system were released, thus allowing the Ark to float more freely. This village was known as the Place of the Eight, named so for the 8 survivors of the flood. This is the first area that Noah and his family lived after the flood. The large anchor stones were hung from the rear of the Ark to keep the rear facing oncoming waves. It created a type of resistance in the water, allowing the rounded rear of the Ark to fend off powerful waves that would critically damage the Ark if struck broadside. This is our first anchor stone. Measuring 11 feet in height, with 4 feet embedded in the ground, it is actually the largest and most beautiful anchor stone found to date. A tapered hole was drilled into the top of each anchor stone, a 5-inch opening on one side and a 7-inch opening on the other, allowing a rope to be pulled through and a knot tied. It was designed to be lifted while in the water when it would weigh less, thereby preventing the top from breaking off. The most striking feature is the crosses that have been carved on the anchor stone. Early Christians came through this area and recognized these objects as biblical items from the Ark. They carved crosses on these anchor stones, representing Noah and his family. The largest cross here represents Noah and is of the Crusader style. The diamond shape with a cross above was Nimrod's sign when he was alive. The diamond represents the Ark that he took credit for. Then the vertical line is the pathway to heaven, with the crossbar representing heaven. The Egyptians had an adaptation of this symbol called the Ankh. Smaller anchor stones or drogue stones can be found near the Mediterranean. This is one of the largest you will ever see outside the Noah's Ark area. The next anchor stone is partially buried in the ground with 5 crosses. The largest cross represents Noah. The next smallest, Mrs. Noah. Then the 3 smallest are the sons of Noah. At the bottom is a possible image of the Tower of Babel, which was built around 200 years after the flood by Nimrod and his rebellious followers. This particular stone has 7 crosses, with the 8th having been removed at some point in time. This stone has a large cross representing Noah. The next smaller cross on the bottom left is Mrs. Noah. The next 3 smaller crosses represent the 3 sons. Then the 3 smallest represent the wives of the sons. This stone does not have any carvings on it, but it does have a hole drilled through the top. Other stones have been found buried, but they have no inscriptions. This stone had a hole drilled in the left side. Then on the right, we can see ancient inscriptions. Vandals have broken this stone, but you can see where the hole once was in the top. Crosses have also been carved on this stone. Five crosses are on this anchor stone, and as we look at the top, we can see where the hole has been broken off. Outside the village of Kazan is a large object that has the appearance of petrified tree bark and with unusual characteristics.
As far as we know, there's nothing else like this anywhere. Nobody's ever...
My goodness.
It's got crosses that are very faintly carved on it. You got a big one here. You got a small one right there. One here. One here. They're harder to see over here.
And this is petrified wood?
Well,
it looks like
Ron said he thought it was petrified tree bark.
Right.
If you look at you ever see, it looks like a little bit like pine bark.
It sounds like metal.
Yeah, well, would the anchor stone be wood?
This isn't an anchor stone.
Oh, I see.
This was just like something that was on the ark, right? I believe.
Well, Ron theorized that this might have been the or part of the cover. You remember at one point it says, and Noah came out of the ark and he took the cover off, or he threw the cover off. And of course that's just speculation. We don't have a way of knowing, but this is a rather unique thing. It has the appearance and the texture of some kind of a bark, but it is stone.
That is a cross.
What?
That is a cross.
There you go.
That is incredible.
It has a very hollow sound.
Very hollow. It sounds like metal.
But it's just a...
Well, it's just that's its harmonic ring.
Right. Yeah. Harmonic resonance, you're right.
Yeah.
But not many stones that do that.
That's true.
With the sun coming out.
Well, I think there's 8 crosses on it. We've been able to find 7. I think there's an 8th one up there.
Our next taxi stop is the home of Noah, near the village of Kazan. This photo was taken in 1977 by Ron Wyatt, showing the walls of Noah's home. Since then, all the walls have been torn down by local treasure seekers. In the front yard stood this large tombstone. On the tombstone was a drawing of 8 people and a boat on a wave. The second largest person was looking downward with their eyes closed. This indicates that this was Mrs. Noah's tombstone. After Mr. Wyatt showed this to someone, that person later hired others to exhume Mrs. Noah's 18-foot sarcophagus. Its depression in the ground is still visible today. Her jewelry was later sold on the black market for millions of dollars. Extending out from Noah's house are these ancient stone fences for containing animals. In Genesis, we are told that Noah practiced husbandry. In this case, we can see signs of animal husbandry. Some fences are more prominent than others, but they are all in straight lines. Uphill, behind Noah's home, is this large altar that he would have used to sacrifice animals to the Lord. It is approximately 10 feet in diameter and has a cube-like shape. In conclusion, we can say that the Darupanar, Noah's Ark formation, is full of evidence which confirms its authenticity, especially when we objectively consider all the information. Many books have been written about the discovery of the Ark. It has been featured in many newspapers and television programs, but most of the world is not aware of this beautiful discovery, which refutes evolution and proves the Bible to be truth. In God's timing, He will reveal this to all mankind.
Well, here we are standing at sea level on the road down to the Dead Sea. This is the highway from Jerusalem which leads down to the Dead Sea. We're going to carry on another 400 meters down below sea level.
At nearly 400 meters below sea level, it is the lowest lake on Earth. The water has a salt content many times more than ocean water, giving it a much higher relative density.
Oh, sort of chafe from walking.
This means that objects float much higher than normal, as Jim, Tor, and Mark demonstrate here.
This is the Dead Sea, also known in the Bible as the Salt Sea. As you can see at the edge of the lake here, just masses of salt. Because the salt content of the water is so high, as the water evaporates, it leaves behind these enormous salt deposits and huge salt crystals. That's just pure salt coming out of the water.
The lake was once a lush and fertile valley. Large cities flourished nearby. Ron's research led him to locate the ashen remains of Sodom near the southern end of the lake, and nearby the ashen remains of Zoar, still visible after nearly 4,000 years. The distinct square outline of the city is still visible, as this color-enhanced photograph clearly shows. The square shape is what one would expect to find, since ancient cities were often built within a square boundary of defensive walls.
So you have to run from that.
Erosion from wind and rain means that virtually nothing recognizable remains. But these mounds are obviously anomalies, structures destroyed long ago. The best preserved remains found by Ron are below Masada. Masada is the hilltop fortress overlooking the Dead Sea, 434 meters above the lake level. Directly below Masada are two well-preserved areas, believed to have been parts of Gomorrah. When viewed from Masada, it's obvious that time and weather have eroded these remains as well, but the remains stand out quite stark from the surrounding desert. Many others are now beginning to realize just what these formations represent.
But I got no doubt it was a city.
Yeah.
And it looks very much like city walls, doesn't it? But
within these areas are many unusual shapes. These certainly defy attempts to explain their origin by natural causes. When examined closely, their uniqueness becomes even more apparent. Remarkable shapes can still be seen in the ash, such as this Sphinx shape.
Here we are standing in the ashen remains of what we believe is Gomorrah, and there's this odd singular shape standing up by itself. There's nothing anywhere around it. It seems to be on a bit of a rise. We believe this could have been a sphinx, perhaps guarding one of the corners of the city.
Entering the remains, one is immediately impressed by the magnitude of them. These were big cities. Prior to the destruction recorded in the Bible, a large population had flourished here for some time before the sudden destruction came. Recent findings reveal just how large that population was. The ancient Canaanites buried their dead, and archaeologists across the valley from this site have found huge Canaanite burial grounds. Conservative estimates put the number of these graves at well over 1 million.
It's fallen down from up high, and that's quite hard.
The remains consist largely of calcium sulfate. Calcium sulfate is a byproduct when limestone is burnt with sulfur. This is exactly what one would expect to find. This shows up in the ruins as alternating layers of pure calcium sulfate and calcium carbonate with silicates, remains of limestone and other materials used in the construction of these cities.
And very much like ash. Whereas the white layers remained fairly hard. Bizarre. It feels like, well, icing sugar or something. You don't get that from river flows.
No. It's just incredible. It's hot here out in the desert at the moment, even though the sun's barely up. Within these areas you find geometric shapes, which are obviously not natural. For example, this shape here, this building shape. Here in the ashen remains of Gomorrah we find exactly what we'd expect to find if this was indeed an ancient city. We find geometric shapes, such as this tower here, or this ziggurat shape in the background. One of the best evidences though is the sulphur balls, and come with us now, we'll show you those right now.
Are they all along the same line?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay, yep. A little ball, and there's a few there. And they're just sitting in the layers of straight ash.
Look at that. That is pure sulphur.
The brimstone has been tested and proves to be extremely pure elemental sulphur combined with small amounts of magnesium.
This will be a really nice sample.
In fact, it's so pure it burns very, very easily, as Aaron demonstrates here.
Oh, that's strong.
The fumes it gives off can be overpowering.
Whoa! You have to go back to the Bible and check.
Yeah, what would that be?
It's in the Bible that it will be an eternal fire, and here's the proof. It's still burning.
Maybe there.
It will be an eternal fire, and here's the proof. It's still burning.
The Bible describes 5 cities that were destroyed, and to the north of the Dead Sea is another of the sites identified by Ron. This one was the city of Admah. Again, the white ashen ruins stand out distinctly from the surrounding desert. This area smells of sulphur, yet there is no geothermal activity here. As with all sites examined, it is far above the Dead Sea, too high to attribute to sedimentary deposits from the lake. And again, symmetrical formations are apparent. For example, these rectangular shapes, which perhaps were once stone blocks.
Where's that sulphur you found, the big bit?
Here.
Oh yeah? It's got a good bit.
And brimstone is present in the ash.
Another lot of carbon.
And here charcoal can be found in the ash also.
Charcoal. Amazing. Coal. Amazing.
So you broke that open.
I need some charcoal.
Charcoal stuck inside it.
Look at that, that's charred wood. That's definitely charcoal.
The evidence found supports the biblical account of how these sites were destroyed. The next step was to have these samples analysed to determine their exact composition.
The X-rays are harder than you want to stand in front of. But bombard the surface and all the atoms then absorb some of that radiation and release it, like fluorescent, at a certain wavelength.
That can be totally crushed.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Okay. It can only be a sulfate.
That test showed that the ash was a sulfate, a byproduct of a sulfur reaction, which is what we'd expect. The sulfur from the sites under investigation is the consistency of pressed powder. The sulfur from Gomorrah is distinctly different to sulfur found in geothermal regions, such as Rotorua in New Zealand.
We'd already begun the first scan of 12, 14 scans.
Takes into a vacuum chamber.
It's this one here.
Oh, this came up, yeah.
And this one will just sit here, pumping it up. And it's going to come up by converting its intensities into concentration.
The analysis revealed that the brimstone was almost pure elemental sulfur, typically about 98%, with a measurable amount of magnesium. The white ash is pure calcium sulfate. What stands out is how clean the samples are, with a conspicuous lack of trace elements. This is consistent with ash from an intensely hot furnace, exactly what one would expect to find from the account in Genesis 19. Is it possible that the Dead Sea sites are the result of geothermal activity?
Sulfur is also found in geothermal areas, such as here, Rotorua in New Zealand. So how does the sulfur here compare with the sulfur we find at the Dead Sea sites? One can smell the sulfur in the air here.
Sulfur from geothermal regions is usually no more than 40% pure and is never found in circumstances like that found at the destroyed cities.
Here's a steam vent in the ground, and all the yellow colour around it is sulfur crystals forming. Sulfur from under the ground. Even though some of these places are called Sodom and Gomorrah, the sulfur here is nothing like the brimstone we find near the Dead Sea. It's this classic bright yellow colour. That indicates the crystal structure is rhombic, very different.
The white colour of the sulfur is the result of it being exposed to high temperatures for a period of time, as happened at Gomorrah. The scenario is this: the cities, built of limestone, which is calcium carbonate, had sulfur and fire rain down upon them. The principal byproduct from this reaction was very pure calcium sulfate, which is what the ashen remains consist of. This is exactly what one would expect to find, based on the account in Genesis 19.
Jerusalem is a focal point for three major religions. Behind us is the major symbol of the Muslim faith, the Dome of the Rock.
To the east of the old city, across the Kidron Brook, is the Garden of Gethsemane. In the shadows of this olive grove, 2,000 years ago, began the most significant events in history.
Matthew 26:36 tells us that Jesus came to the Garden of Gethsemane after he had the Last Supper with his disciples. We're in the Garden of Gethsemane area, and you can see these old olive trees here. These date back hundreds of years, if not thousands. And this is the area just beneath Jerusalem where Jesus came on that fateful night.
It was here, in the Garden of Gethsemane, on that fateful night, that Jesus was betrayed by one of his disciples.
It was in the Garden of Gethsemane that Jesus made the decision to go all the way and save the race of man. He prayed, "If it be possible, take this cup from me." But then he said, "Nevertheless, not my will be done, but thine."
To the north of the old city is another garden connected with the last days of Jesus' ministry on earth. In the bustling Arab quarter of Jerusalem, there is an oasis of peace, the Garden Tomb. Discovered in 1867 by a British general, an association was formed in Britain to purchase and maintain the property. On the property is an ancient Jewish tomb dated by archaeologists to be from the time of Christ. It is hewn out of solid rock, and the tool marks of the workers are still visible.
Go in your heart and mind to the New Testament.
Now we do read in the New Testament that as the women were approaching the tomb, the first resurrection morning, the one question they had in their minds, above all, was an obvious one, but nonetheless they were asking themselves, who will roll away the stone? We're told Joseph's tomb was sealed with a great stone. Now,
This here is that tomb, a first century Jewish tomb hewn into rock.
It once had a large rolling stone to cover the doorway, as the Bible describes. In all points, it precisely fits the tomb described in the New Testament that Jesus was placed in. Down to the smallest details, like the low doorway and the interior layout, it matches the Bible perfectly.
There's some wonderful evidence that this is the actual tomb of Christ. Of course, the crowning evidence is that it matches what the Bible says. This is the weeping chamber beside where the body would have lain. As you can see, this is large enough for a small group of people to come in, and that again fits the Bible clues. It would have had a door that would have gone from where the stone stopped here right across to this point here. That we know from some wonderful evidence, which we're going to talk about shortly, right here. John chapter 20, verses 11 and 12. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping, and as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and seeth two angels in white sitting, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. We can see here a place where an angel could sit, and on the opposite side, likewise, a place where an angel could sit. The doorway is just here. Someone could look right in the door and see, just here, where the body would have lain. This is the spot where Jesus' body was, and where Mary saw the angel sitting here and over there, two angels. Two other significant discoveries on the property help confirm that this was a garden in the time of Jesus. One of the evidences that this was indeed a garden 2,000 years ago is this wine press, one of the largest in Israel. In the garden is an extremely large water cistern. We can see it down here. It's actually the third largest in Jerusalem. And here we have a picture taken from inside the cistern. You can see the size of it. This cistern dates back to Roman times. This cistern is at least 2,000 years old. That's another strong clue that this was a garden during the time of Christ.
The tomb itself is located very close to Skull Hill, which was known in biblical times as Calvary or Golgotha.
We're on the walls of Old Jerusalem, and over here there's a lookout point where we can see the eye sockets of Golgotha. Come on, we'll show you that. Behind us we can see the eye sockets that General Charles Gordon saw back in the 1800s. It was this that made him realize this is the real Golgotha right here.
Even after centuries of weathering, the skull face is still easily discernible. It was a very appropriate landmark for the crucifixion site that was here in Roman times.
Matthew 27:33 tells us, when they would come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull. Where Jesus was crucified was near a place of a skull. In the cliff behind us we see what General Gordon saw back in the 1880s, where the cliff had been cut through to make the quarry between here and Jerusalem. It exposed a skull face.
Still visible beside the tomb is an amazing piece of evidence. When the angel rolled the stone away from the door, the iron rod hammered in by the Roman soldiers was sheared off, and the remaining portion of it is still there today.
For years, Ron's critics stated that it was not an iron pin, but rather shrapnel that had lodged in the wall in recent times. It seemed to me that if the metal was of modern origin, an analysis of the object would reveal an alloy rather than the basic metals which were employed by the Romans.
With permission from the Garden Tomb Association, Richard was given the privilege to drill a small hole in the metal object and to collect the filings that were produced. Arrangements were then made for Hebrew University, Department of Earth Sciences, to analyze the sample by way of their scanning electron microscope.
This is metal?
Right, and a lot of it is rust, but there are some good pieces of metals in that rust. We'll have to kind of put it out on something and pick out some small, that's not rusty to look at.
In order to acquire accurate data, careful preparation of the specimen is an essential part of the process. Painstakingly, the samples were placed one by one onto an automatic stage and inserted into the sealed electron chamber for analysis.
Here we have two types of detectors. We have WDS detectors, which are wavelength dispersive spectrometers. Those are those for boxes. And we have an EDS detector, which is this one with the liquid nitrogen on it.
First, an analysis was performed on the central portion of the object.
Mostly iron, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the other one right to the right of iron there? Two different irons?
Two peaks of iron.
Okay.
During preparation, the material from the inner and outer portions of the metal object had been carefully separated. A scan of the outer material yielded an important discovery. The material surrounding the central iron object consisted of lead.
Okay, this is lead.
That's lead right there.
The microscopic analysis revealed not a modern-day alloy, but rather the basic metals of iron and lead. After reviewing the findings, the Israel Antiquities Authority immediately pronounced the object to be an iron pin set in lead. It seems that in order to secure an iron pin in stone, it was common to cut a hole, fill it with hot lead, and then drive the pin into place. When the lead hardened, the pin was secure. We find that the Roman Colosseum was built in the same fashion, using iron pins set in lead.
They just found that exactly what you've said. There are two metals in there, and it's a familiar amalgam that was used in the time of the Romans. So it could well be. It is at least consistent with the tomb having been sealed and a guard set with some sort of pin or something there to stop the stone rolling away.
In Roman times?
Yes.
Okay.
The first and the last, and it is possible that Christians had come to use this, perhaps for the purpose of burial, but others suggest perhaps for adoration or for the purpose of worship, in which case there may even have been a church built over this area at some point in time. We can see that it's very possible there was a covering or a rooftop over this area, so that again is a possibility. If it was used for worship, perhaps we would even have a foot washing station here.
The section on the left is what is called the weeping chamber, where people would gather to mourn and to prepare the bodies for burial on the right-hand side. The graves are on the right. Yeah. During the Byzantine period, which is about it's actually 324 to 640. But during that period, this was an area that was used for Byzantine worship, and all the evidence is there for that. The heart-shaped baptistry, the gully taking the water away, and the foot basin here, and the place for beams and supports for arches, all indicates it was a covered area. It was a church.
Thank you. This tomb fits all the clues in the Bible. The evidence speaks volumes that this is the genuine tomb of Christ.